Hey guys, I just want to let you know that I'm now a certified spiritual life coach. If you resonate with the topics and lessons that my guests and I discuss on my podcast, and you feel that you could use some empowerment and direction in your journey of becoming who you truly are, consider booking a free discovery call with me on my website at kindlemccullough.com. And now on to the episode. Hey guys, I'm excited today. I have with me Rosie Kuhn, and she is a friend and colleague of Elizabeth Sabet, my teacher for transpersonal psychology. Transpersonal coaching. And she just hooked us up and said she'd be great to have on your podcast. And we talked, and I saw her website, and she just seemed really great. I've started your book. Fierce Compassion.
Fierce Compassion. Fierce Compassion, Becoming an Agent of Transformation.
Yes, it's really great. Looking forward to finishing it.
Thank you.
So Rosie, you want to tell us more about yourself? You've done so many things and have a lot to share.
Well, I'll try to give you the cliff notes of it. Otherwise, I'm here all day. I grew up in Detroit, outside Detroit, and family of 9. I was number 6, dysfunctional, alcoholic family, and Catholic to boot. So going from that, where I experienced myself as pretty insignificant and invisible within that crowd of beings, it's like trying to find my way. Like, how do you create a reality that's safe when you're not safe, when you feel unsafe, So in a sense, a lot of our work in the world as human beings is like, how do I stay safe? How do I maintain this place of safety? Knowing that we're probably more than that, but at least we can stay safe. So I found a way that if I was loving, and basically codependent, like really focusing on the other person, that I would stay safe and I would be loved and I would be happy. Okay. Well, that didn't work. As most of us know, when we try to do something, manage and strategize to get what we think we need, we kind of miss the whole point of the story. So I got married and had kids because that's really what I wanted to do, but I got married to have kids, and so the marriage wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't loving. And so after 6 years, I got divorced. And then I started studying marriage and family therapy to be a therapist because I found that my therapist, the person I was working with, really heard me and saw me and got me and was there to support me in seeing myself differently. So it's like, I want to do that.
Was that the first time that you experienced that?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So I studied marriage and family therapy, got my degree in marriage and family therapy down in, the school was called California Family Study Center, which is either not around anymore or is something else. But I got my master's in that, and I moved to Nova Scotia and worked in recovery for 8 years. And 2 things I realized. One is that the people in the 12-step program were getting better. And they had something that I didn't have, first of all. And they had a perspective that included a spiritual relationship with themselves. And in the therapeutic world, that doesn't exist-ish. It does a little bit more, but generally speaking, mental psychology is all focused on the here and now 3D world. So I realized that, and it was like, I need to grow my orientation in the world from just this therapeutic, limited perspective to something greater. So that was the beginning of there's something more, both professionally but also personally, because I was missing something in myself that was missing and absent and kept me in a state of fear and striving and strategizing as opposed to being at peace and serenity. which many people in recovery have a sense of serenity.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I learned a little bit about the 12-step program in that Carl Jung actually inspired the guy who started it. I'm forgetting his name, Bill
Bill
something.
W.
Yeah, Bill W. And that, yeah, Bill W. was alcoholic and struggling, and Jung was trying to help him. And then finally, Jung is like, "I can't help you anymore. You need a spiritually powerful experience, and so go to this Christian group." And he had an experience, and that inspired him to start the 12-step program. And originally, it was a lot more spiritual and geared towards helping people have these profound spiritual experiences to help them with recovery. And then over time, it got watered down and got a lot more less spiritual. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. And at the same time, I don't know if you're familiar with Emmett Fox, but he's also was an amazing influencer at that time of the 12 Steps of Bill W. Emmett Fox wrote a book called Sermon on the Mount, and it's a small book, and it's about Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, and it's just
Right.
a beautiful articulation. It's just, even though I grew up Catholic, I don't think I grew up Christian, but it goes beyond all of the learnings and the dogma to the purest sense of truth of what Jesus was saying. So it was very interesting. And the way that it influenced the 12-step program is also really cool.
Wow.
I left Nova Scotia, went sailing for 2 years. And part of that was I crossed the Atlantic Ocean it was a 93-foot sailboat. So big, but not very big when you're a tiny little thing on the ocean. And I
Right.
was terrified. I was sure I was going to die. I was called, I wrote a book called, I've written many books, but one book I wrote called The Unholy Path of a Reluctant Adventurer. And so I tell the story in that book of middle of the ocean, no big deal, just no big storms. There was what's called a following sea where the waves can get maybe 20 feet, but we're talking about a boat that's huge, right? So this 20-foot wave is not dangerous, whatever. But I was terrified the whole way until this one night when I had an experience of I was lying in the boat on sort of in my stomach on my tummy in the boat, and I had this experience of being one with the boat. The boat was one with the ocean. The ocean was one with the planet. The planet was one with the universe, and all was great. The boat was it was just a beautiful moment, a luminous experience. That was the beginning of a transformative shift.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Kind of reminds me of I don't know if you read the book Life of Pi.
Yes.
Yeah. And the movie is it's gorgeous, all the
Yes.
graphics and stuff like that. But I'm just curious, why did you go on that trip? And were you just alone on this boat, or what was the circumstances there?
When I was in Nova Scotia, I met this man who was from the United States. I grew up in the United States. I was American, but I moved to Canada for reasons. Well, that's where my husband's work was, and then I just loved Canada, so I just stayed there. So I met this guy, and he was building this amazing boat. And bottom line is, I fell in love with the boat, and then I fell in love with the guy. So kind of had to go. But but it's not like, oh, I fell in love with this, and it's like that thinking we do when we fall in love. This was a calling, and that's again what I wanted to mention in terms of the book Unholy Path. Is I talk about a lot of struggles that I had, especially as a kid, or growing up in the getting married, and just the challenges and dilemmas of early adulthood. In all the places that I was called, that I felt this calling to do things that was out of my comfort zone. Like I wouldn't choose to go across the Atlantic Ocean. I didn't want to, in a sense. I was terrified to go outside of land, but this calling was greater. And so I had to follow the calling. I could have flown across the Atlantic and met the boat on the other side, but I just felt called and compelled to do that, and so I did that. And in the midst of that, I had this transformative experience of like, wow, I'm safe because this boat was built to be in this ocean. It was built to do what it was doing. I'm safe here. So it was the beginning, and I can talk about the beginning and the beginning and the beginning, because there's always a new beginning in a sense. Like this was the beginning of, and then the next is the beginning of, and the next is the beginning of. But I was, the intention of the captain was to take the boat around the world, and I was intending on doing that. That didn't happen. I was only on the boat for 2 years. The boat went around the world, but not with me. It wasn't the right thing to do. So the next cliff note element is I found myself in California. Not I found myself, but again, I was called to attend the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. It was like when I was off this place of saying, no, therapy wasn't enough, spirituality, but where and how, and, PhD in clinical psychology, that would have killed me because, there's no there's no spirituality there as far as I know. So I came across the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, and it was like, that was a hell yes. It was in California, which I didn't want to go to, and it was so far away from my reality on the East Coast, but it was, again, I was called to go. So I went out there and did my PhD in transpersonal psychology, and I focused, the first 2 years I focused on creative expression, and then on spiritual guidance, because that again was what was missing in my therapeutic training, was how do you be with people and their spiritual issues. So I did that, and then I was introduced to coaching. I was introduced to Hans Phillips, and what he was inviting was this level of integration of the human and the spiritual, but not calling it that, just the human spirit, I'll call it that. And it was such an integration of what I had been learning, not only in terms of therapy, but in recovery. Recovery is huge, really important element and component of who we are in our human being. We're recovering ourselves from the past, if you will. And the spiritual part, how do you hold all three? So I was just in Yummyville, basically. I just loved what I was learning, and then I was able to teach it very, very quickly. I went into training. Hans and I created a training program at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, and then I went on to continue that for about the next 9 years. I continue to train people, basically on a one-to-one, and doing some other things we can talk about later. But that's the nutshell. So I finished my PhD and the training in about 2002, 2001. And so since then I've been coaching, training, writing, talking, speaking, and cultivating a deeper understanding and a awareness of who I am as a spiritual being in this human form.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I'm curious, what do you think led you down the path of working with people with addiction and recovery?
Well, first of all, it was the only job I could get. So, there's all kinds of divine leading going on. My degree, my master's degree in marriage and family therapy in the 80s, this is about 86, I think. Nobody knew what that was in Nova Scotia. They knew psychology and social work. So I had a master's, but people were going, yeah, no, it's not it's not this or it's not that. So finally, there was an opening in a very small town in Liverpool, Nova Scotia, and the supervisor called me and go, why haven't I heard from you? It's like, I've been sending out resumes, but nobody's responded, but it's because of my degree is in something else. So it really was the only thing that opened up to me. And the other side of that was because my parents were addicts, basically, were alcoholics. It was like, I'm not working with alcoholics. I'm not working with those people. And so in terms of what spirit, what divine guidance has in store for me, what I had in store for me was like, oh, hell yes, we've got some, this is the focus, you know. So that kind of was that. I had no intentions of working with addicts and their families, but that's what happened. And it's foundational to how I see us as unfolding and what gets in our way in this human experience, human spirit experience.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to mention, that, we all have addictions on some level in some way to something. And so I think that's a really big part of coaching and obviously the human experience.
Yes. Yep. We think of substances as the things that we're addicted to. And what we're really addicted to, and this is in the 12-step program in the big book, it says, what it causes our addiction is restless, irritable discontent. So in a sense, when we feel restless and irritable, we grab something to create comfort. It might be guilt. It might be, oh, it's because of me. I'm a really bad person. It might be victimizing. Oh, they're victimizing me. That's why I feel this way. It could be candy or sweets or, a drug of choice or a substance of choice or, sex or dating or retailing. I'll go buy something. That'll make me feel better. So we start to use things to make us feel better. And it's not about being addicted to the thing or the activity like business, being busy. It's the restlessness that stirs up that I need to do something to feel better. So when we can see that, become conscious of, oh, I'm feeling restless, I'm feeling uncomfortable in my body. Oh, I'm about to grab 462 different things I can grab to comfort myself. That's the moment that we can start to see that patterning. So addictions are just patternings, but most addictions are hormone based in a sense. If I do something that soothes me, then my hormones calm down.
Right.
The calm down hormones go up. So if I can train myself to go, I'm feeling uncomfortable. What is that about? And be present to those experiences in a way that's like honoring, like, yeah, I'm scared right now. It's like, okay, let's just be with this. Is there something really to be scared of? No. Okay, great. Let's just keep being here. This is a good thing about having a life coach is we can support people and say, let's just kind of be here right now. And we can walk through that.
Right. It's less scary if you have someone else and help find ways of
and that's the value
within that.
Yeah, that's the value of having a 12-step program or a fellowship. And they're online. And the other element of this is really, really valuable is the adult children, what used to be called adult children of alcoholics, but is now adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And their perception and perspective and principles are just so valuable for all of us adult children. And 99% of us are still living as children in a grown-up body. So it's a very valuable support community online and in communities, in towns and cities. So that's the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Family. And it's aca.org, I think, if people are wanting to see it online. So that's really, really valuable as well.
Yeah, great. So did you want to kind of transition into talking about calling or somewhere else?
Where would you like to go?
I do like that. I also I liked you were talking about spiritual relationship with themselves, and I was just wondering if you wanted to expound on like what does that mean?
I always wonder why people clear their voices right before they're like. I think this is a really huge. Well, it's a huge conversation, and everybody wants a spiritual experience, right? We want that experience of God-ish, and some of us have it. most of us at some point will have it. In the statistics of people who've had spiritually transformative experiences, they say it's about 45% or something like that. I think it's closer to 80. But most people don't acknowledge. Oh yeah, that.
Mm-hmm.
But where you have an experience of something beyond our 3D world, and where we recognize the divinity of ourselves and the world and every being. That's what Buddha is talking about,
Mm-hmm.
the peace of all beings. When we know that state of being as divine, then we start to cultivate potentially more of that. So I make the distinction between metaphysical, and was an interesting element of being in a study of transpersonal psychology, which is like, what's transpersonal? People don't, it's not a word people understand. And
Mm-hmm.
even those of us in school, it was like taking a course in transpersonal psychology so we could actually understand what the hell we're doing. What are we
Take
studying?
this class so I know what this class is.
Exactly. And the transpersonal world is including body, mind, spirit, emotions, and community and creativity. Now, when we think of things like love is a non-physical, non-tangible, and our emotions are non-tangible. Our thoughts
Mm-hmm.
are non-tangible, but we don't respond to them as non-tangible. We think of them as like logical and rational, because I'm having a logical, rational. But all of these elements and aspects of life that are beyond the physical, but influence the physical, that's our metaphysical world.
Mm.
And, in the world of, I'll say the world of realm of transformation, but manifestation. We go, our thoughts create things. Okay, great. I'll change my thoughts and then things will change. And that's the foundation of the process. But that's a metaphysical process. You can ask questions because I'm just like, it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. It's like that's CBT stage, but even that is somewhat spiritual if you really think about it, like you're saying.
Yeah. So most of us dabble in metaphysics. That includes meditation. That includes tarot cards and occults. That includes out of body experiences, chemically induced or naturally induced states of being. But in those states of beings, we can have an experience of ourselves as divine and or the divinity of the reality around us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So everything is spiritual, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everything is
Right.
divine.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see it that way. We don't think of life as divine and everything is of God. We don't think of it that way, and it's very difficult to shift from, because unless you've had a divine experience, and even then people doubt. A lot of people who have had spiritually transformative experiences doubt the truth of their experience.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I had my own, obviously. I've talked about it a lot of my podcasts. But it wasn't until I, years later, 6 years later, when I started to make sense of my experience and be like, okay, maybe there's truth to it, for me to really gain the benefits and integrate that into my life. So, and I've talked to other people who've had experiences too, and that are not at that place yet where they've learned to understand it and trust in what it's teaching them, I guess. And so, yeah, just backing on what you're saying.
So I'm not familiar with your experience. So just in terms of understanding, so where was was there a moment of divinity for you where you experienced divinity?
Yeah, mine was a very, very strong, very body, very, it's a Kundalini awakening, basically, and body shaking, experience of love, joy, peace, oneness, ecstasy, all of that. So it was very strong. And so it was very, very obvious. But then the next month I was flying high. I was doing great, but stopped eating and sleeping, got taken to the hospital, to the psych ward, got put on meds, and then people didn't. They just told me it was bipolar and it was just a manic episode. So all of that kind of, I guess, put me down the road of. It took me a while to figure out the spiritual side of it and to trust in that and understand what happened on
Beautiful.
that end.
Beautiful. So for me, and I am now a student of Paul Selig's work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with.
Yes, I know him.
And the guides that he channels. And for me, it was an up-leveling. It was like going back to graduate school in cultivating this capacity for the divine, for bringing in more of that versus something else, the metaphysical. Does that make sense?
So say that one more time.
So listening to Paul Selig, or even, once you get it, you can see, like, whether it's the Course in Miracles, whether it's Law of Attraction, whether it's Oneness by Rasha, which I read, whether it's Paul Selig's work, whether it's the 12-step program. I don't know if I said that already, but they all start to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I needed sort of I needed a focus that was taking me to the next level.
A framework.
Pardon me?
A framework?
A framework. Or a teacher, in a sense. A teacher that would take me beyond my own scope of what I think I know, right? And it's like, no, we have to elevate to the next level. And that requires me to see where I'm holding on to old patterns, habits, addictions, and where I have to make a choice to cultivate a relationship with my divine self, the divine self of the universe, the divine self of the divine truth of every being on the planet and everything, even my old dirty sock sitting here, right here. The divinity in all of it, because God is everywhere. The divinity is everywhere. I yet to experience that quality of being that my sock is divine, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. I think, after my experience, and a lot of people go through this, the dark night of the soul, and I think that's our beliefs and understanding of the world after our experience is it's not big enough of a container to hold that experience, and so our understanding is kind of broken of the world, and so
Beautiful.
we're kind of in the dark.
That's
and so it's like, where can we find meaning? Where can we find something that, I don't want to say is going to explain it and make sense of it and hold it all, but something bigger that can help us get closer to understanding and make more sense of it. And so, like you're saying, that's the process. And in that, you discover your old beliefs and unhealthy patterns and stuff like that you have to work through. And so, yes, it's the process of transformation.
That's right. And what you're saying is really, really important, and to me is more foundational to my work as a coach than ever before. That we're focusing on the process of the the continuum of you as you're moving through life in this physical body. The process, and you used the word a few times, so it's like we're all in a process. And a life coach or transformational coach, whatever you want to call it, coach can help you go, okay, what's that like for you right now? Dark night of soul. It is. I've been through a few, and not just like for years. I mean, like really, the deep, like a cauldron, just simmering away stuff, right? And it's a process. And the more that as a coach we can support our clients in being right here, right now, then we're able to support them in not only understanding, but accepting, this is the awareness of this moment is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to finish, like, get through this or heal it, or where's my magic
Mm.
wand? I have a magic
Mm-hmm.
wand. I'll just tap you on the head and you'll be through it. That's transformation. It's like, no, you're in the transformative experience. When you're in the cauldron, the alchemy is occurring, the evaporation and disintegration of the old patternings. Not only what you're thinking, but vibrational frequencies of your being that have been with you for lifetimes. And we can be in that and go WTF, which it is a WTF
Yes.
a
Mm-hmm.
lot, right? Especially if you're taken into mental health wards and been diagnosed with something that's not true, and you're just not being seen or heard, gotten. It's tremendously annihilating and shattering, which contributes to greater degrees of dark night of the soul. Like, who am I without this? Who am I in this situation? Who am I within the circumstances that are unbearable and so I'll call it ignorant, but ignoring my being. That's my perspective.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I always think of Viktor Frankl and being in a German POW, concentration camp for the Jews, and being able to find meaning and even beauty within the worst of circumstances. And so, if we can make that mindset switch and then integrate that into our body, that there is meaning and something to gain through this dark night of the soul, this pain, this angst, this existential whatever,
Yes,
then it makes it easier to bear it. No, this is just the process, and
beautiful.
this has helped me in the long run.
Yeah, that that it's incremental is really, really important. You know, most of my so I'm 72 now. I say that just to give context to who, what, where, who am I. Um, but for the longest time, it's like, oh, this thing I'm feeling, it's going to last a month, and just the worst of the worst. And then it was 2 months, and then it was 6 months, and then and someone said, oh, it's because it's a birth process. You're birthing through something. It'll be 9 months and you'll be done. And it's like 9 months came and went. Like, you never know.
Mm.
And so that part of me that was like, okay, now it'll be done today. I got an awareness or an epiphany. It's like, okay, now I'm done. And it's like, yeah, no, because we're in a process.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do I have a revelation or an epiphany, but now I have to integrate that. Like, where does that fit into? And given the degree of dysfunction that you grow up in, the degree of ignoring who we are as spiritual beings, the degree to which we've got work to do, in a sense. And we come in to these places where we're here to learn something. I love Christian Sundberg's information on YouTube. He's got a lot of videos out there about his experience coming into the world. Highly suggest listening to that just for fun. But that it's still quite often we're not addressing the divinity that is. And Paul Selig is very clear about, or the guides and Paul Selig, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we are divine. We are God. It is all God. And even if you are atheist in a sense, the oneness of the universe, it's like if we're separating ourselves out in any way, then it's a non-dual perspective, but it's like if we're separating ourselves out in any way, then we're not in that truth of our divinity, that no one's separate from source. Nothing is separate from source. So
Mm-hmm.
that is a big training for me. It's like, not only, and this is, I think, a really important principle for me is, like you said, oh, I'm almost done. I can't wait to finish your book. It's like, no, you gotta, when there's a book that's bringing stuff, it's a training. You have to
Right.
study. I have to I listen to Paul Selig's books as opposed to read. I have to listen to them over and over and over again because I'm studying and needing to integrate, not only intellectually, but my whole being needs to know the truth of what he's saying.
Mm.
And most of us go, oh, yeah, there's some information. No, that was really great. And I read a book called Self-Empowerment 101, which is sort of another training support book for people who are coaches or want to be coaches or anybody else. But people go, oh, I read it and I'm going to go back and read it again. But they don't, generally speaking. But it's meant to be a book of like, what's really true here for me? Like, what's the truth here for me? And whether we're reading or writing or training, like you're training to be a coach, there's levels and levels and levels of knowing yourself through that material. And I've had people who have been training with me for a couple of years go, oh man, I just read that chapter in Fierce Compassion, and oh my God, it's the first time I got it. I've been reading it, but because there's something there at a level they hadn't yet. And it's the same for our intention to know ourselves, like who we truly are. And we can point to, this is another point that's really important, we can point to those people we know who have had spiritual experiences. A lot of spiritual teachers, right? Jesus, Buddha, help me out here, Mohammed, Moses, all these people who had spiritual experiences. Mm-hmm. And they go, this is what we learned. And they go, okay, people like me or you or go, okay, I have faith that that person knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So we're in that state of faith until we have our own experience of knowing. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
We have to cultivate faith.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to think how to say this. Yeah, just like when you're a child, there's a lot of things you don't know about the world. You trust adults, you trust those who've had experience, and if you don't, then you pay for it, and you learn through the experience.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But also, as you get older, you learn, hey, maybe some things I was taught, obviously, were not the healthiest. And so you learn to find your own path and what is healthiest for you yourself.
That's right. And it's part of the challenge of, we have faith in our parents, we have faith in our banks, we have faith in our politics, we have faith in religion and educational institutes, and we go, in our health, we've got to put our health institute in there. We have put health, we put our faith in all of that. And the truth is that all of those institutions are letting us down. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what do each and every single one of us do with the breakdown of that trust? Like every single one of us, truly, I believe this, is in a shattering of that reality, but we don't have a container that will support. We do, called spirituality and or support in the ways that they are. But we go, no, I got to keep my faith here, even though it's not working, because I don't have anything else. Or as a lot of people say to me, I don't know how to do me without this, whether it's a relationship or my connection or my habit or my addiction to busyness. I don't know who I am without being busy. I don't know who I am if I'm not anxious. I don't know who I am if I'm not mothering people, or I don't know who I am.
Yeah, that identity is all these things.
Yes.
And again, going back to that experience, we have to have faith till we have our own experience. And
that's right.
The deeper the experience, the deeper we have trust. And so that experience of God, with God, one with God,
yes,
is that, maybe the deepest level, probably the deepest level of trust. And so then once we have that, then we're able to confront where the physical, these lower levels, these more illusory levels of society that we can see where they're failing, and we can be like, that's okay. I don't have to blind myself to that, because I know at the deepest level I am safe.
Beautiful. In the book Oneness, which is a transcribed channeling from by Rasha of Oneness. It says, "We are here to completely reject consensus view of reality." Now, I read that 8 or 9 years ago, and it's like, again, what the, WTF? It's like, what? I'm here to reject consensus view of reality? Like, that's impossible, right? It's just like, what are you talking about? Like, it confounded my mind because, but so I won't, that just confounded me. But the more that I was reading the book and integrating it and experiencing myself, I could see where I am continually, as we were saying, putting my faith in things that don't aren't supporting me.
Hmm.
They're not. When you put your faith in something, you want that sense of trust and being honored and respected and seen, and that wasn't happening. So I, little by little by little, I had to detach myself from these identities or these perceptions or these beliefs or these principles that weren't working. But I love that it said we are here to completely reject consensus view of reality. Well, it's like, what do you do now? What do you do? But
What's
it's,
left?
again, it's incrementally that I myself could understand that. We all go, oh, okay, we're now over here. We've just made the leap of faith. It's like, yeah, no, that leap of faith is
Step.
step by step by step. I gave a talk at um, bookstore in Mountain View, California. I can't remember the name right now, but it's a guy. As I was talking about stuff, he goes, I'm a quantum physicist. He said, do you know how big a quantum is? Because I was talking about quantum leaps of faith. He says, do you know how
Hmm.
big a quantum is? I go, no. And he goes, it's this. And he kind of put his two, fingers together in the thumbnails, like you can't even get one between your two nails, in a sense. A quantum is so tiny. So quantum leaps of faith is these incremental steps towards towards wherever we're going, in a sense. We don't even know. I wrote a book called I've Arrived, well, sort of, and it's 101. I have to get it. Hang on one. It just takes me 1 second to get it because I love that. I love the title. The the title to me was the most important part. Kendall.
I love the title.
I've Arrived, well, sort of. Discoveries, 101 discoveries and revelations stumbled upon while on the sacred path to who knows where. So that's what that looks like. Little tiny book, 101 sort of little blurb, page, 1 page long, generally speaking. But we're stumbling on revelations ourselves constantly if we're willing to see that. And we can a lot of people put their faith in doubt and self-doubt and cynicism. And that's a place you put your faith if you want to. Or you can put your faith in something else. We're a choice. So if
Yeah. I think that helps people feel safe. They're like, oh, I can. Here's my box, and so other things that are challenging that and breaking that box, I can just be cynical, and then I don't have to break my box.
yeah,
I'm safe in my bubble.
yeah. I watched some thing about parapsychology and this fellow who lost his mother a long time ago, and he goes to a psychic, and the psychic channels her in her presence, and he experiences it, and he's done. And then he's cynical again. He goes back to cynical. He goes to another psychic. He goes to another psychic. He continually is doing this for years, remaining in that cynicism and doubt. It's just a fascinating process. It's a fascinating thing rather than saying, well, I mean, just to watch people and observe that faith in cynicism and that attachment to it versus if I let go, now I have to have faith in something else. And who am I without that?
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting and funny that why is he going to psychics if cynical. Why does he even try? So it shows that there's a part of them that wants to believe, but his cynicism is just more powerful or
That's
overcoming that.
That's right. And I think that's true for so many people is I want it, but, or I'll say to people, they say, I want more money in my life. I want more abundance. And I'll go, okay, wait, great. What's your perspective on the universe and prosperity and all of, and God? And they'll say, oh, God provides for everyone. The universe provides for everyone. And I go, okay, do you live in that, or do you, what's your relationship to that? And they go, well, I believe it, but I don't live it because I'm afraid, ... And I hear that
Mm.
so often. People will go, well, I believe it and I say it, but I don't live it because it's too scary. And that leap of faith, or the process of moving in the direction, not again the big leap of faith, but the willingness to say, this is what I know and I don't live it. And that conversation is basically what I'm having with 99% of my clients. Is like, here's what I want, here's what I'm committed to, and I'm living in my fear and not in my knowing. This is one more thing I'll bring up. I realized when I was talking to some people who were potential trainees, this was about 6 years ago, they had a state of knowing. And that state of knowing, I speak to it in a sense. I speak to everyone's state of knowing. We all came here as spiritual beings to have a human experience. So that means all of us know of our knowing, truly. We all know it. So I say my job is to let you know that I know that you know. And in that, I'm seeing you in your knowing. More and more I can experience that with people, and the people who have greater degrees of articulating of that, or their presence speaks to that level of knowing. We're not talking off the scale. We're just talking that we have that knowing and the part that's afraid to be in our knowing. But the more that I know that you know, then I'm going to address you in the wisdom of the knowing of you. I can address, there's a part of you that's scared. I can address the part that's wants to hold on to things. But if I'm addressing also the part of you that knows, you know the difference.
Mm.
And you go, wow, yeah, I do know the difference. Okay, great. So I'm speaking to your wisdom. I'm empowering you to. I support and empower people to support and empower themselves to be in that knowing, and that's what again Paul Selig does for me. Is that work is empowering me and supporting me to be in that knowing, and it's work. It trains me every friggin' day. Because it's difficult. We think this is easy. Oh, I had a spiritual experience. Now I'm full of love and life, but I hate that guy, and I hate the politics of that guy, and she really, and all of the blaming and shaming that we do. But I had this spiritual experience, which makes me spiritual. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
that's, it's like, ah, what do you do with that? People do that all the time. Oh, I had a spiritual experience, makes me special, but I hate.
Now I'm enlightened.
Say that. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
I said I had a spiritual experience, and now I'm enlightened, and there's nothing else to do.
That's nice. And let me just tell you how to do it. And I've had clients who are like that. I just want to tell the world how to do it. It's like, okay, so what's in your way? So for that person that says, hey, I want to be a teacher in the world, they're not being a teacher in the world. And what is that about? They haven't done the work. They haven't done the work that I'll say undermines, but minds and conceals that part that thinks they're less than. That feels inadequate,
Mm.
that feels incapable, insignificant. All those words, insignificant, invisible. And so the part that wants to be the egoic teacher person, that's not, it's like, okay, I got this, I want to be a teacher, but what's in my way? And most likely it's the other part of us. the part that's a scared little girl or a scared little boy. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
definitely.
it's challenging. It's like, oh, I wish I had a spiritual experience. It's like, what I've watched and what you went through, hell no. No, I had my thing is I've had spiritual experiences, teeny tiny little fragments every single day. It's like that was that little spoonful is enough to grow that capacity to have faith in something beyond consensus view of reality. And some other people were cracked open like you. Everybody's got whatever they've got. You came here to have experience to have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I almost say that like, it wasn't because I was such an awesome person that I had this experience. It was because I was so unhealthy that I needed something so extreme to get me
Yeah,
to where I needed to be. And so other people might, you know, they're actually doing better, so they don't need something so extreme, and so they can experience, like you're saying, the spiritual transformation day by day in little increments. And I mean, that's the majority of my life too. I had that experience, but majority of my life is every day.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. Again, I come back to where I was, let's say, 30 years ago, when I was in my 40s, and go, yeah, how do I have that, or how do I, my partner
Mm,
did a lot of holotropic breath work type work, and it's like, oh, every
mm-hmm.
time I did it, it was like I'm going to have an epiphany, and I'm going to be transformed and arrive, right? And I expected and
Mm-hmm.
anticipated that arrival to the place of enlightenment, then I'd be done. It doesn't work that way. And quite often, and I've read this in a number of places, people who have some people who have the extreme experiences were pushing their envelope too far. So people who meditate too
Mm-hmm.
much or do something to get that level of enlightenment, quite often, I don't know if
Right.
that's true for you, but it pushes them over the edge. They've gone too far.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't trying. I didn't even know that something like that was possible. I wasn't trying. I was just trying to get healthy. But yeah, I definitely, even after the experience, you really yearn for that experience, and it's really hard because the world doesn't feel
Yeah,
so amazing anymore. And so, the experience is awesome, but it's also really hard afterwards when you come back down to earth and life isn't so great. And so, I think there was a time of trying to recreate that experience and get back to that and stuff like
yeah,
that. And you have to work through that and not escape the mundane, the
yeah.
everyday life.
I was a member of ASSIST, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences, and I trained coaches for them for 4 or 5 years. And it's like it doesn't matter what we're talking about in terms of stories. People's own integration process is so personal, and the extreme. A friend of mine went to Israel to see her family, and she had a I'll say a Kundalini experience out of nowhere, out of nowhere, and it's like you just don't know. So it's not. So I say some people who are pushing their envelope because they want that enlightened state. That's some people, and other people have. We all have it,
Mm-hmm.
each of it our own unique way. So I just want to really make that clear: is that we're not. It's not just we're
Yes.
trying to, like you said. I didn't even know. I didn't know. And so this is what shows up for you on your spiritual path. We never know.
Yeah. Mm.
And what I'm hearing is that connecting you to the divine truth and attempting to create that in your life every day, right? It's like you had that experience that becomes the stake in the ground, and going, how do I cultivate this even when the world looks so gray and dull and unloving and unkind? How do I cultivate this within my own reality so that I can stay sane in that and true in that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we had our conversation to talk about what we're going to talk about in the podcast. And one of the things we talked about was, I think your word was metaphysical versus divine. And um, do you kind of want to define the difference and get into that?
Um, I, I, I think we're too many of us are trying to what we're calling spiritual experiences are actually just metaphysical, in a sense. Um, all the things that we talked about, like all the oracles or astrology or whatever. Sometimes we have, or even meditation, we have a tendency to call that a spiritual practice, but it's actually a practice of being in a state outside of our more dense reality, the 3D world. So it gives us
Mm,
access to greater vibrations, capacities for knowing ourselves in the world of metaphysics, of the quantum field, of this larger world. It's when we can tap into or have that experience of divinity, of divineness. It could be a moment of awe or wonder, a spark of joy in our heart. Like, what is that, And that ability to know that as something greater than the consensus view of reality, that's when we start to explore there's something greater here. And so that's the point that I'm saying, and this is what I heard, I think, Paul Selig say and others, is that when we can address and know the divinity, you had an experience of divinity, divine union. You had it, you know it. And so there's no more faith required to be here now.
mm,
And the degree to which we being every single one of us, the degree to which we can, I don't know where it was, I heard faith is, David Hawkins says, faith is the suspending of disbelief, the voluntary
mm-hmm.
suspension of disbelief. And I love that. So faith is the voluntary suspension of disbelief. And in the sense that, okay, you had that experience, but I haven't had it, so it can't be real. That kind of thing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
most of us are like, I want what you've got. And this has happened with, when I was in Nova Scotia, this fellow who was probably 60, I was in my 30s, and he'd been in recovery in the AA program for a long time, had a fifth grade education, worked in the pulp mill his whole life, was retired. He had serenity. He had a state of wonder and grace about him and delight. And here I have a master's degree, and I came from this family, and I had all this stuff, but I was miserable. I was suffering. And
Mm,
one day, and this is one of those slogans in any addiction program, is I want what you got. And so Big Don, he was like, here's this guy. He's got he's got no material affluence as we would consider important and valuable, but he had serenity. That was the beginning of my recovery, truly, in terms of saying, I want what he's got. I don't know what that is. And that really took me on my own path of recovery. I'm not a substance abuse person, but I am a love addict and a codependent and, addicted to anxiety and dread and depression and all of these elements
mm-hmm.
that are invisible that were part of my life. So my point is in that moment, Don had something, that serenity. It was enough for me to start letting go of my disbelief voluntarily so that I could have the serenity that he has.
Yeah. I think I always like the part of the Bible talking about um, just ability to go through all kinds of trials and tribulations, but have that inner peace and serenity. And so that journey of surrendering that belief that our circumstances have to be a certain way, the outward, external has to be a certain way for us to have serenity, and realizing that through the worst of it, we can still have that. And that doesn't mean that we're always happy, but even through our pain and discomfort and unhappiness, there is a foundational underlying level of
That's right.
serenity.
That's right. And we're cultivating that capacity. And part of that for me is if it comes down to what's your personal principles of why you're here, if you will. I thought when I was a little kid, I'm here to get married, have kids, and live happily ever after. That's my That's my why. And now, many, many years later, decades later, I go, I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. I'm here to witness and observe the capacity of my potential. In a sense, I want to know my full potentiality, and so
Mm-hmm.
every day is an opportunity to see where I'm limiting that, and focusing on fears and limitations and on processes that keep me stuck, and go, oh, that is not working. That's not getting me closer to fulfillment or serenity or that stuff. So I have to go, do I, Kendall, my lifestyle is I live in the woods, on an
Mm.
island in a 24-foot trailer. I own my property. I have 10 acres. But I live in the woods. I have a beautiful view over a valley. It's not that big, but it's just... So my life is very simple. It's
Mm-hmm.
not full of material wealth and stuff, and I don't go traveling and do a lot of stuff. I'm very quiet. And what I've been able to cultivate is that place of what's true for me, what's my serenity. And I have to, over and over again, practice seeing this relationship or these kinds of relationship causes something other than serenity.
Mm.
And what's the patterning? What am I attached to that's keeping me in that having faith in that I should have faith in that, and changing that and shifting it. So our life is just ongoingly creating moments and opportunities for growth, to know my full potential. Does that mean I'm not open to prosperity, like financial prosperity? No, I'm totally open to it. Constantly working on letting go of what's in the way. Let go of train. One of my favorite quotes is Yoda's: "Train yourself to let go of what you're afraid to lose."
Mm.
So my identity as a mother, my identity as a coach, my identity as a famous something or other, my identity as just fill in the blanks. All those things are things that I'm afraid to lose. But it's not working for me. Though it's not working for me. Creates angst and upset and sadness and anger.
Yeah, definitely. Anything we hold on to ultimately creates pain, because life is transitory, and it is, again, like you said, about this learning and growing. And if you're going to learn and grow, then things are going to have to change. So if you try to hold on things, then you're hurting your growth and creating more pain instead of a flow.
And, when people say I'm not ready to let go of something, I go, I totally get it. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
72, I'm still growing. And we, obviously, as eternal beings, will be always growing, right? So those are those principles that goes, I'm an eternal being and I'm always growing. So I'm never going to arrive. I'm going to get a lesson, and I'm going to get this far, and then it's going to take me to whatever's next, and then whatever's next. But sometimes I'm not ready. I don't want to. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually I write a lot of blogs. You can find those on my website. But it's like, I'm not ready. If you're not ready, you're not ready. And that's a really important component of coaching people, is to hear where their resistance is, and
Mm-hmm.
not and just honor that. Those places of resistance. I know those places of resistance. And if we can honor that in every single one of us, then we're more likely to be effective, to go, hey, I see you there, and I totally get you're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, yep, nope, not ready. Okay, great. as opposed to you should be ready. You should have arrived. You should be there. You should have gotten that. It's like, yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't work that way. And the more that we acknowledge, even I find that the whole community of um, LGTB,
LGBTQ.
all of that, and onward,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
That
right.
that is such a phenomenal encouragement to own what's true for you, and maybe go beyond. I don't know. I'm just experimenting, or I think I'm this, but I don't know. But it's such for me a beautiful arena of possibility, of people living in their fullest potential to be of their own self-expression, the divine self-expression.
Yeah, I think it's a vehicle of, you know, just like psychology itself is only 100 or so more years that's been around. And so it's the beginning of, not the beginning, but really the field of um, understanding ourselves and our emotions and our thought processes and all that stuff and what's going on. And so I think that LGBTQ is this further, hey, what's going on inside of us? What is changing? What is different?
Yeah,
And I think it's another layer that sometimes not doesn't recognize or recognize that there's another layer of the soul and divine, but it is helping us get further deeper.
yeah. It's a support. I mean, much like with, I think I'll say the 12-step program, but it's a community of people who support the presence of being around our sexual expression, the divine expression through sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Divine expression comes through all aspects, all fields, all, whether it's health or sexuality or sensuality, all of that. It's the divine expression through us. I'm I'm currently challenged by a dilemma, if you will, and I focus in my coaching a lot about what the dilemmas are. And as I'm in this process, I realize I'm a teacher. I'm waiting for some things to happen in my professional life. But as I'm waiting, I'm feeling this impulse, this inspiration from the inside. I need to teach. I need to teach. I need to, right? And I've got books and I've got videos and I've got this and I got that. But there's something inside of me that is so compelling, this calling, in a sense, to something else. And I go, what is that? Why is this, justify or rationalize or be cynical about it? Like, why is that so important? Why don't you just wait? Or why don't you just, because it gets to be so compelling, you can't not listen, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And this part of me that is an expression, call it a divine expression, as a teacher. I'm a teacher. I need to teach. I need to teach. And people go, well, teach what? Teach. It doesn't matter right now. I mean, in this moment, it's like I need that expression in the world to, as teacher, that's a divine expression that wants to come through me. And that's what's true for every single one of us, is that divine expression is seeking to get expressed as authentic you, as the essence of you. And that's what I want for every single person on the planet, is to know, I know what that is. I'm still afraid of it, not ready to go there, but I know that's my path. It's like, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And I think that exploration of self and learning all of the external things in society and people and religion that have told us this is what you are, this is what you're supposed to do. Learning those voices and learning, well, who am I, and what is my calling? What do I actually think? And then listening to the spirit and following that.
Yeah. And, we go to astrologers, and I've gone to astrologers and hand analysis and all those things, and they tell you things. This is your purpose. But it doesn't mean anything, because you go, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to go there, or, okay, I'm an Aries and I do this and this is what, it's like, so what? I don't know unless you have a coach or someone that can say, okay, so what does this mean to you? Like, where does this
Right.
live inside you? How is this an expression of you? How are you interfering with the expression? If you don't have someone to have those conversations, quite often we're just lost in the intellectual, here's what your life path looks like. It's like, so what?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
what?
How do we integrate this, what they're telling us, and how do we get there?
That's right. So again, the metaphysical scripts and maps and things of charts of the world and how that aligns with who you are in your essential nature, that's what we're doing here on the planet, if you will. It's like, wow, how do I be this expression? How do I be potentiality in the world? And the only way I can be potentiality in the world is see all the ways that I'm limiting or interfering with my potentiality. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I don't know. I'm waiting for these people to tell me something, and I go, you're waiting. I'm waiting. But as long as I'm waiting, I'm not doing anything. I'm not being
Right.
in my potential. I'm saying I have to wait for it's like, no, I don't have to wait. And watching the process, my process of going, I'm supposed to wait, I should wait, they're in charge, and go, wait, stop. No. Here's what's in my heart. Here's what's wanting to express in the world. I got to find a way to do that. I have to find a vehicle to do that. So I'm going to create, I have a YouTube channel. It's got like 300 videos on it. But I'm going to create a series called I Want to Be a Better Coach. And so people can send me questions and say, here's where I'm challenged as a coach. And, how would you handle this situation? Or what's showing up for that situation? So that way I could be a teacher, but in a different venue than your normal teacher. So that's kind of
Mm,
fun to think
right.
about and imagine and be called to that possibility. And am I scared, or I go, oh, and my cynicalness comes up. It's like, no, you don't want to do that. It's like, can't help but do it because it's a hell
Mm-hmm.
yes, like crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It got to a point where it's a hell yes, even though everything was going, hell no, you're going to die.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's a hell yes, I got to go. Got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the,
Yeah. There comes a point where our um, the fear energy versus this is the conviction. That's what I'll say.
beautiful.
The conviction energy.
Yeah,
Um, conviction energy gets bigger than the fear energy, and it's like I can't ignore this anymore, despite my fear.
that's right.
I have to go for this.
That's right.
Take the leap.
That's right. And it's one of the things when I wrote the book, The Unholy Path of a Reluctant Adventurer, I didn't know for that at the end, at the end of writing it all, it would go, wow, this really distinguishes my life based on callings, major callings, like 10 of, I'm going like this because there's a list, I listed them, what life is like living from callings. I didn't intend that. That's just what was happening. Versus my life as I should get married, I should have kids, this is how you're supposed to do it, and all the control issues in a sense. And it was really, for me, an epiphany, if you will, at the end of this book going, wow, this is what life looked like as I was trying. This is what life looked like through my callings. And it was really a fun moment for me to go, wow, I didn't expect this. So anyway, that was just kind of a fun moment.
Yeah, that's great. What do you think about calling? Do you think that there's you kind of talked about this a little bit with like teaching. You're like, I'm called to be a teacher. Do you think that there's multiple paths within a calling that you could choose, and that would be the right way?
I think and this is true for where my coaching is I really am listening. I'm listening for what is true for you. And what that means is, I was called to be a parent, and I was called to give up custody of my children. And people go, what the, how could, but you don't know what you're called to do until you're in the moment. I couldn't, the moment of choosing to give up custody of my children, there was nothing but a hell yes. This is the right thing to do. Now, everybody in the world said you're a bad person for doing that, but in my heart, in my knowing, that was the most loving, kind thing I could do for my children. Like, you don't know until you're truly listening and willing to it's not even a surrendering. It's just like listening to a truth. Like you said, you get to a point where you can't not say yes.
Mm.
And that's what you know. I can't not say yes. The yes goes against consensus view of reality. It goes against everything. I was totally abandoned by my family, if you will, because of this choice I made out of love. My daughter still, who's 40 something, she still hasn't forgiven me. She still doesn't see that I acted from love. Okay. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And again, going to that place of, I must have been wrong, question myself, question those choices, but go, that was a yes in a deep knowing that it could not be any other way because I love my children. And so you have to come to that level of living, of knowing yourself. Now, some people have to go through major bouts of disease or illnesses to find that moment of true knowing for themselves, or the loss of a loved one, or loss of a financial situation, whatever it is that brings you to those moments of truth for yourself. We all have opportunities to come there. And the degree to which we step into that, that's another thing. And
Right.
ignore.
Yeah.
I could have ignored these truths and said, I'm going to take my kids and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But I don't know why it's not because I'm some spiritual being, spiritual, like high spiritual, like some fancy schmancy. I just listened and heard what was true for my kids. I don't know. I can't say anything more in terms of justifying that. I just know that was the most loving thing I could possibly do for my kids. And
Right.
I'll say this too. It took me a long time. I went into a state of denial of my own emotional loss, if you can imagine. And about 4 or 5 years later, I was talking to a psychologist and go, I'm some discomfort's coming up and I'm not sure how to be with this because I denied my feelings. I knew I did the best thing for my kids, so I stayed in that reality versus going into the true grief of not only my children, but motherhood and all the rest of it. And this psychologist said, Rosie, you put yourself in front of the bus to protect kids, but people don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when he put it that way, I truly saw what I did. I mean, he saw me, he got me in that moment, which was really, really helpful rather than saying, I did this, but nobody, I don't know how to. And he goes, you put yourself in front of a bus for your kids. And it gave me a different perspective. Anyway, just to kind of look at that kind of process. And that's why I wrote the book is like, why did I leave my kids? How did that happen? And just unfolded the story the way it did. And still I question, did I do the right thing? Because I do.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes people think, okay, when I follow my calling, that means it'll be easy or I won't have pain or regret or whatever. And it's like, no, you can't bypass that. Whatever choice we make, if we don't follow our calling, that's going to be painful. And if we do follow our calling, it's going to be painful too.
That's right.
But following a calling will give us that. We know deep down that this is the right choice and this is what we're supposed to do, and so that knowing gives me the strength to bear the pain, and also, like you said, the external other people or other things that say, hey, this wasn't right, and you're like, deep down I know this is right, even if it looks crazy to the rest of the world.
Yeah. And that, it's like I appreciate what you just said, that just because it's a calling, it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean we're going to Disneyland, or on some, all paid expense place to some paradise. It doesn't mean that. It means, oh, this is the path to be taken. And that means, for instance, when I but was called to go on this crossing of the Atlantic Ocean, I thought, oh, okay, it's going to be what it is, but to have those moments every single day where I was sure I was going to die, right? And then have a moment of a transformative moment of union and unity with everything in that moment. It's like, okay, fascinating. but you never know what's going to show up. Did that make my life blissful? No. Did it make it? I'm in a learning opportunity, and that was the learning opportunity I chose. I could, like I said, I could have chose a different one, and I would have had. We're always going to learn what we need to learn, regardless of the path.
Right.
But this
Mhm.
one, it's like people say, "How do you know?" It's like, well, when it's compelling enough, like you said, you can't say no. Okay, there you go. And honoring yourself and respecting this attunement, if you will, this alignment, this listening, this thing that's coming through you, this inspiration, this sense that there's a felt sense within us that is drawing us in a direction, and go, wow, that's really, it's intangible, but it's so tangible. And it's a intangible, but it's a felt sense. We know it when we feel it. And I trust and honor and respect every single individual, because I know we all have that. That we came in as a spiritual being. We know the divineness of our being, and we've been shrouded in the density of consensus view of reality. More and more of us are speaking to, so who's in there? I see you in
Mhm.
there. What do you see in there? And that really enlightens people, because they're seen, heard, and gotten. That's all. That's what all of us want, is just to be seen, heard, and gotten.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
if I let you know that I know that you lighten up when I say that. You brighten up. It's like, wow, she knows that I know, and she's letting me know that I know that she knows that I know. I'm so excited about that, because I'm seen. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
somebody knows
So
that I know. They're seeing me not in my lack and my not enoughness, and I need more of this. She sees me in my knowing, in my wholeness. Thank God, I'm not crazy.
yeah. Right. Yeah. That breath, that release.
That's
Um.
that breath. Thank God, I'm seen.
Mhm.
I'm known. Somebody get me.
Yeah. I think it's that empowerment. So often in the past, it's like you have to rely on this external authority, or if you follow this path or listen to this person or this book. I grew up Christian. Like if you read the Bible, and you know this is this is the safe way. This is what you should listen to, and
Yeah.
don't listen to yourself. But yeah, it's like there is no quote unquote safe path, but um, that divine within you, that spirit of that's the truth that they need to follow. And of course we're going to make mistakes, and sometimes we're going to think we're hearing that voice when we hear another voice, but that's the process of learning and growing. And so we can't just ignore that and push it down and say, hey, listen to this external authority or this book, whatever. Number one, that's ignoring the fact that we're still filtering that through our lens, so we're still filtering it through us. But also, we're never going to become empowered and believe that we can do things ourselves. We're always going to be pushed to and fro by external voices. We don't have to become attached saying, this is me. Say, this is something that's moving through me. And I know that it's a temporary thing that I'm working through. Unfortunately, at this point, Rosie's mic had some technical difficulties, and so the rest of this podcast, you won't hear her anymore. But she did ask me what was my takeaways for this podcast episode, and you'll hear my response a little bit more, and then the podcast will end shortly. So didn't miss too much, but unfortunately, we did miss some of Rosie's wisdom. Ask me the coaching question at the end. What's the takeaway? That's hard whenever you've gone an hour and a half and you've explored so many things, and it's been really great. It's hard to sum it all up. I think just what comes to mind is just to embrace all of life and what it brings, and have courage that we can do it, and that we have this inner knowing, and we're never alone, and we're safe. You know, yeah, that's my takeaway. Yeah. Same. And we all help each other learn different aspects and of who God is, and um, we're each other's teachers and students. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Rosie, and sharing your story and being vulnerable and honest about the highs and the lows, and just all the wisdom you shared and what you've learned through your rich life.